Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Stuka Pilot, Chapter 6, Part 9, Stuka vs. Tank. I am first to go home on leave, but I am determined to fly to Berlin before I do, to find out what they mean to do with me. A special mission awaits me, and therefore I have to report to a department of the Air Ministry. The high total of my operational flights is the sole reason for all of this. If this is the sort of thing it will get me into, I shall not let them keep count any longer. In Berlin, no one knows anything. In that case, I can at once resume my command. My wing has presumably made a mistake. In ministries and departments, however, mistakes are denied on principle. After much telephoning, I am instructed to proceed, on the expiration of my leave, to Rechlin, where experiments are being carried out in the use of anti-tank weapons from aircraft. The officer commanding, Flight Lieutenant Steppe, is an old acquaintance of mine. Afterwards, the establishment is going to Bryansk in order to confirm theory in practice. This sounds rather better, but all the same it is not an operational command. I am congratulated on my promotion to Flight Lieutenant. I spent the next fortnight skiing in St. Anton. A big ski tournament is being held here. As an active competitor and senior ranking officer, I am at the same time captain of the Luftwaffe team competing. There are a lot of big shots present. Jennewein, Pfeiffer, Gabel and Schuler, for they also belong to the Luftwaffe. It is a pleasant holiday, and at the end of the fortnight my batteries are recharged. I wish I could get out of going first to Rechlin. I would rather go straight to Bryansk. The anti-tank experimental unit has already assembled and has conducted its preliminary tests. We have here Ju-88 type aircraft with 7.5 cm cannons installed under the pilot's seat, and Ju-87 Stukas like those I have always flown, fitted with a 3.7 cm flak cannon under each wing. They use a special ammunition with a wolfram center, which is a tungsten core, supposed to penetrate any armor likely to be encountered. These shells do not explode until after they have penetrated the protective armor. The Ju-87, which is not any too fast of itself, now becomes even slower and is unfavorably affected by the load of the cannon it carries. Its maneuverability is disadvantageously reduced and its landing speed is increased considerably. But now, armament potency is a prior consideration over flying performance. Experiments with Ju-88s armed with a large caliber cannon are soon abandoned, as the difficulties which arise hold out no promise of success. Also, one operational flight undertaken with Ju-87s results only in losses. The majority of our establishment is skeptical. What impresses me is the possibility of being able to shoot with an accuracy of within 20 to 30 centimeters. If this is attainable, one should be able to hit the easily vulnerable parts of the tank, provided one could get within close enough range. That is my conviction. From visual models we learn to recognize infallibly the various types of Russian tanks and are taught where the most vulnerable parts are located: engine, petrol tanks, ammunition chamber. Merely to hit a tank is not enough to destroy it. It is necessary to hit a particular spot, that is petrol or ammunition, with incendiary or explosive stuff. So a fortnight passes, then the ministry wishes to know whether we are ready for an immediate transfer to the Crimea. The Soviets are exerting heavy pressure, and there we shall certainly have a wider and better field for the practical test of our theories. To fly in at low level and then open fire from a few yards above the ground is impossible on a stabilized front with strong AA emplacements. We know that much because the losses are greater than the results. We shall only be able to use this weapon, if at all, where the front and consequently the AA defense is on the move. Flight Lieutenant Steppe stays behind at Bryansk and will follow us later. I fly over Konotop and Nikolaev with all serviceable aircraft to Kerch on the Crimean Peninsula. At Kerch I meet up with my wing, and it wrings my heart to see the old faces again, and for the time being no longer to be one of them. They are bombing the hotly contested bridgehead at Krimskaya. Comrades tell me that Soviet tanks which have broken through are advancing not more than a mile or so beyond the old main battle line. This means then that we shall have to attack them while they are still covered by the sighted and therefore heavy flag defense of their own front line. The AA in this battle area is concentrated in a very restricted space. After the end of the fighting near the oil fields not far from the Caspian Sea, where the Soviet oil center lies, practically all their AA artillery has been brought up from those distant areas and concentrated here. They have traveled up through Mostok, Pyatigorsk, Armavir, Krasnodar. On one of the first days after our arrival, we already make the first test south of Krimskaya. Tanks which have broken through are located 800 yards in front of their own main line. We find them at once and are eager to see what can be done. It is mighty little, for I am still flying above our own front line when I receive a direct hit by flak. Other aircraft fare no better. Now, in addition, enemy fighters arrive on the scene, an old production series of Spitfires. This is the first time I have met this type of aircraft in Russia. One of our young pilot officers is brought down in an orchard. He turns up the same evening with fruit and diarrhea. After this beginning and the feeble results of our first test, the outlook is none too rosy. We are the object of commiseration wherever we appear, and our sympathizers do not predict a long lease of life for any of us. The heavier the flag, the quicker my tactics develop. It is obvious that we must always carry bombs to deal with the enemy defense. But we cannot carry any on our cannon-carrying aircraft as the bomb load makes them too heavy. Besides, it is no longer possible to go into a dive with a cannon-carrying Ju-87 because the strain on the wing planes is too great. The practical answer is therefore to have an escort of normal Stukas. A fresh Soviet assault offers us the opportunity to initiate this important new departure. Northeast of Temyuk, the Soviets are endeavoring to turn the Kuban front. They begin to ferry parts of 2 divisions across the lagoons in the hope of bringing about by this maneuver the collapse of the Kuban front. We have only isolated strong points with a very thin support line holding the marshland and the lagoons northeast of Temyuk. Naturally, their striking power is limited and in no way a match for this new Soviet operation. Our reconnaissance confirms the presence of a strong assembly of boats in the harbor of Yeisk and near Achtari. These are attacked by our Stukas. The targets are so small and the boats so numerous that these attacks alone cannot deflect the Russians from their plan. Now, at all hours of the day and night, they swarm across the lagoons. The total distance they have to travel is something like 30 miles. The lakes are connected by little canals, and so the Russians edge nearer and nearer to Temyuk, behind the Kuban front and far in our rear. They pause at intervals to rest under cover of the tall reeds and on the ayats. When they keep themselves hidden in this way, they are hard to locate and recognize. Yet, if they wish to resume their advance, they have again to travel across open water. We are in the air every day, from dawn till dusk, racing above the water and the reeds in search of boats. Ivan comes on in the most primitive craft. One rarely sees a motorboat. Besides rifles, he carries with him hand grenades and machine guns. He glides across in the little boats with a load of 5 to 7 men. As many as 20 men are packed on board the larger craft. In dealing with them, we do not use our special anti-tank ammunition, for a high potency is not required here. On the other hand, one must have a useful explosive effect on hitting the wood. In this way, the boats are most quickly smashed. Normal flak ammunition with a suitable fuse proves the most practical. Anything trying to slip across the water is as good as lost. Ivan's losses in boats must be serious for him. I alone with my aircraft destroy 70 of these vessels in the course of a few days. Gradually, the strength of the defense increases, but that does not stop us. Flying Officer Rufer, an excellent gunner belonging to a neighboring anti-tank squadron flying HS-129er, is brought down and lands like Robinson Crusoe on an island in the middle of the lagoons. He is lucky. He is rescued by a company of German assault troops. Soon, the Soviets realize that they must write off this plan, for with these losses, success is no longer attainable. It is now about the 10th of May, and I receive the news that the Führer has awarded me the oak leaves. I am to leave immediately for Berlin for the investiture. The next morning, instead of my usual excursion flying my cannon-carrying aircraft at low level over the Straits of Kerch on the search for boats, I am on my way to Berlin in a Mi-109. En route, I puzzle out a plan of campaign to wrangle an early return to my wing. In the Reichskanzlei, I learn from Wing Commander von Below, the adjutant of the Luftwaffe, that some 12 soldiers are to receive the decoration at the same time as myself. They are members of all the services of different ranks. I tell Wing Commander von Below that I intend to explain to the Führer that I am tired of being seconded through the experimental unit and wish to be allowed to resume command of my old front squadron in the Immelmann Stuka wing. Only on this condition will I accept the decoration. He urges me not to and gives me his promise to deal with the matter himself. I say nothing of the steps I have already taken in memos addressed to the Air Command. Shortly before we report to the Führer, von Below brings me the welcome news that he has just fixed everything. I get back to my old squadron with the proviso that I shall continue to study the usefulness of the experimental aircraft. I gladly agree, and now at last I can really be happy over the oak leaves. The Führer pins the medal on our chests. He talks to us for over an hour about the military situation, past, present and future plans. He touches on the first winter in Russia and Stalingrad. All of us who were there at the front are amazed at his unerring grasp of detail. He does not blame the German soldier at the front, but sees things exactly as we up there have experienced them. He is full of ideas and plans and absolutely confident. Again and again, he stresses that we must win the victory over Bolshevism, as otherwise the world will be plunged into an appalling chaos from which there is no way out. Therefore, Bolshevism must be smashed by us, even though for the present the Western Allies refuse to recognize how disastrous is their policy for themselves and the rest of the world. He radiates a calmness which infects us all. Each of us goes away to his task revitalized, and so 2 days later I am back with my wing at Kerch. I take over the command of my old squadron.
Part 10. On the Kuban and at Bjelgorod. I have taken a cannon-carrying aircraft with me, and I introduce my squadron to the new machine. Wherever I see a chance of an operation for the experimental unit, it takes off together with mine. Later it is reformed into an anti-tank squadron which operates independently, but in action it is subordinate to my supervision and command. The Bryansk establishment now also follow us. Captain Steppe likewise returns to the squadron formation. There is work enough for us Stuka bombers, for the Soviets have got across the Black Sea and behind our front. They have landed and formed beachheads on the hilly coast east and southwest of Novorossiysk. These are now frequently the target of our attacks. Reinforcements and material continue to arrive at the landing quays. The AA defense is as furious as at other crucial points of the Kuban bridgehead. Many of my comrades make their last flight here. My squadron commander bails out over the beachhead. He is lucky the wind carries him over our lines. So we fly back and forth between the beachhead and Krimskaya. I generally dive with my flight almost to ground level and then fly off in a low-level flight out to sea near the beachhead or over the marshland further north where the defense is weaker. The small release height of the bomb improves the bombing results, and also the defense is not yet accustomed to our very low-level tactics. If, as we approach Krimskaya above the tobacco-growing ravine, the flag begins and many a new crew gets windy, they are soon calmed down again when they hear the old sweats having their fun over the radio with a joke or a snatch of song. Someone calls out, "Maximilian, get cracking!" This refers to the skipper of the second squadron. He keeps on circuiting in the flag, eternally delaying his dive so that the aircraft behind lose their sense of direction. This self-confident coolness then soon infects the tyros. Not infrequently I do a loop, a roll or some other stunt. I wonder if the AA gunners think I am having a lark with them. The weather here does not hamper operations. Almost invariably a bright blue sky and glorious sunny summer weather. Any day there is no flying, we go off to the sea for a bath, either to the Sea of Azov or the Black Sea. Parts of the coast have magnificent beaches. If Schwilblatt and I feel like diving, we go into the harbor of Kerch, where there are cranes and walls of sufficient height. The aerodrome at Kerch is so crowded that we move with our squadron to Kerch Bagherovo, 6 miles to the west. We billet ourselves in El Kolchos. As there is plenty of timber available, we soon set about building ourselves a shack for our mess. Petrol is rationed at the moment, and we fly only if it is absolutely necessary. So, during these weeks we get a whole series of free days which each one of us spends in his own fashion. Schwerblatt and I take our almost daily 6-mile run and so get to know the whole district, not only from the air. Every night we receive a visit from Soviet P-2s and old DB-3s. They chiefly bomb the railway station, harbour and airfield in Kerch 4. We have some AA sighted there, occasionally also a few night fighters. We generally watch them coming and going. For almost every attack, a few come down in flames. Our adversaries are not very skilled at night fighting. They evidently need much practice. They have an occasional stroke of luck every now and again. A bomb drops on an ammunition train standing in a siding, and for hours explosions light up the night sky with a ghostly light. The earth trembles from the detonations. Very soon, these raids become a part of our daily routine, and we generally stay in bed and sleep. Otherwise, we feel the effect of the lack of sleep on our own raids the following day, and that can be disastrous. We are in the last days of June and nearing the end of our time in the Crimea. Minister Speer is here on a visit in connection with a vast construction project on the road from Kerch. At the same time, the wing is visited by the Japanese. At this time, too, Squadron Leader Kupfer, the skipper of our wing, has his birthday. There is sufficient reason to celebrate. The beautiful garden of the summer quarters of the wing is presently enlivened by the music of the gay but slightly out-of-tune band of an army unit. They play all the request items the musical clamor for. Everyone has his choice. In hours like these, one forgets that home is so far away and that a war is going on. All are carried away out of time and space into an invisible world of beauty and of peace, where there is no Krimskaya, no beachhead, no bombs, and no misery. Such hours of relaxation and reverie hearten all of us. By the beginning of July, the Soviet pressure has slackened and the German front is stabilized. It stands between Krimskaya and Moldavanskoye, a retirement of only a few yards. We never have the housewarming of our shack, for on the 4th of July we receive urgent orders to move. Nobody knows exactly where we are going. At all events, we are to fly today to Melitopol. There we are to receive further orders tomorrow. We take off northwards above the blue waters. Melitopol is a town on the lines of communication far behind the front. The aerodrome is occupied by a bomber formation with Heinkel 111s. Our colleagues let out that today of all days a German entertainment party is giving a performance, a ballet troupe of 10 pretty girls between the ages of 18 and 20. In less than no time, the aircraft are undercover and overhauled for the following day. Cupid lends everyone wings. Everyone tidies up at lightning speed and literally flies to the theater. The sight of pretty German girls after so long a time cannot fail to cheer the heart of every soldier from the Russian front, old and young alike. Some people indeed start clowning. Pilot officer Jekyll uproots the plants in front of the theater with the intention of offering them later as bouquets. In duty bound to the honor of their regiments, the army units do not easily yield ground, and we are involved in the keenest competition with them. I am not quite sure whether we shall succumb to the feminine glamour, or whether after years in Russia we shall find the girls more or less pretty. Schwerblatt is also dubious. Finally, he says it would have been better if we had gone for our usual 6-mile run. We should then have been spared this misgiving. In the morning, the engines again hum their familiar song. We now know our destination, Charkov. We land on the airfield to the north and are billeted outside the city. The city itself does not make too bad an impression and is doubtless one of the showplaces of Soviet Russia, such as we have seldom seen. A skyscraper in the Red Square is a typical specimen of Soviet architecture and, damaged though it is still a much gaped-at object of Ivan's pride. Otherwise, the buildings date back to the Tsarist era. The city has parks, a wide network of thoroughfares, cinemas, and a theater. At the crack of dawn the next morning, we take off in the direction of Bjelgorod, our operational area for the ensuing few weeks. On the ground, we meet old acquaintances from the Eastern Front, crack divisions, for whom we are happy to fly. We know that here we are going forward and there will be no unpleasant surprises. Besides armored divisions, the Guards divisions Totenkopf and Großdeutschland are in the line. This offensive is a northward thrust with Kursk, occupied by very formidable Soviet forces, as its objective. We are pushing diagonally into the bulge of the Russian front, which extends westwards to Konotop and hinges on Bjelgorod in the south and is bounded on its northern side by the open country south of Orel. The ideal would be to establish a main front line between Bjelgorod and Orel. Will the units thrown in be able to achieve this? We shall not let them down. We are in the air from dawn till dusk, in front of our tank spearheads, which have soon gained 25 miles and have reached the outskirts of Oboyan. The Soviet resistance is strong, even in the air. On one of the first mornings when approaching Bjelgorod, I see half to port an HE-111 formation flying above me. The flak opens up on them, one aircraft explodes in the air and is blown to smithereens. Such experiences harden one. Our comrades' sacrifices must not be made in vain. Afterwards, we attack in the area of the same Soviet AA positions. During low-level attacks, I often catch sight of the wreckage of the shut-down Heinkel glittering in the sun. In the afternoon, a Luftwaffe flight lieutenant comes to me and informs me that my cousin has been killed that day. I replied that my cousin must have been shot down this morning, northwest of Bjelgorod, in a Heinkel 111. He wonders how I can tell him so exactly what happened. My cousin is the third son of my uncle to be killed in the family. He himself will later also reported to be missing. The next weeks deal us severe blows in the wing. My training school friend, Flight Lieutenant Wodka, skipper of the 8th flight, is killed. So too is Flying Officer Schmidt, whose brother had recently been killed in the air fighting over Sicily. In the cases of Wodka and Schmidt, it is not quite clear whether their aircraft exploded when coming into dive or when operating the bomb release. It is possible that a short circuit was due to some act of sabotage which caused the explosion. Again, some months later, this idea occurs to us when similar things happen. At the moment, in spite of the most thorough investigation, we can establish no definite proof. Great tank battles rage below us during these operations, a picture such as we have rarely had the chance of witnessing since 1941. The tank masses face each other on open plains. The enemy anti-tank defenses have sighted themselves in the rear with their guns camouflaged. Sometimes also the tanks themselves are dug in defensively, especially when they have been immobilized but otherwise still retain their fighting efficiency. Numerically, the Soviets' tanks are always vastly superior to ours. Qualitatively, one immediately recognizes the superiority of our tanks and armament. Here, for the first time, our Tiger tank is used in large formations. All our tank types invariably have a more rapid rate of fire and their gunnery is more accurate. The chief reason for this is the better quality of our weapons, but the decisive factor is the superior quality of the men who handle them. More dangerous for our tanks is the Soviet heavy and very heavy anti-tank artillery, which appears at every key point of the battle area. As the Russians are masters of camouflage, their pack is only spotted and neutralized with difficulty. The sight of these masses of tanks reminds me of my cannon-carrying aircraft of the experimental unit which I have brought with me from the Crimea. With this enormous target of enemy tanks, it should be possible to try it out. It is true, the flak defenses covering the Soviet tank units are very heavy, but I say to myself that both groups are facing each other at a distance of 1,200 to 1,800 yards, and unless I am brought down like a stone by a direct hit by flak, it must always be possible to crash land the damaged aircraft in our own tank lines. The first flight, therefore, flies with bombs behind me in the only cannon-carrying aeroplane. So, the attempt is made. In the first attack, 4 tanks explode under the hammer blows of my cannons. By the evening, the total rises to 12. We are all seized with a kind of passion for the chase from the glorious feeling of having saved much German bloodshed with every tank destroyed. After the first day, the fitters have their hands full, for the aircraft have been heavily damaged by flak. The life of such an aeroplane will always be limited. But the main thing is, The evil spell is broken, and in this aircraft we possess a weapon which can speedily be employed everywhere and is capable of dealing successfully with the formidable numbers of Soviet tanks. There is great rejoicing in the flight, the squadron, the wing and the group over this newly gained discovery and its practical confirmation. In order to secure supplies of this aircraft, a signal is immediately sent to all sections of the anti-tank experimental unit asking for all serviceable aircraft to be flown here at once with crews. So, the anti-tank flight is formed. For operational purposes, it is under my command. The succeeding days and battles complete the picture, and further successes are not denied us. While the cannon-carrying aircraft go in to attack, a part of the bomber formation deals with the ground defenses, the rest circle at a fairly low level like a broody hen round her chicken in order to protect the anti-tank aircraft from interception by enemy fighters. Little by little I discover all the tricks. Skill is often the result of getting hurt. We lose aircraft in weakly defended areas because we are cruising in the middle of an artillery duel. The airspace in the line of the artillery trajectory must be avoided, otherwise there is the danger of being shot down by accident. After some time, the Soviets have managed fairly successfully to cope with our air attacks against their tanks. If it is at all possible, they move up their AA guns with the leading tanks. The tanks also are equipped with smoke shells to create a fog screen or to imitate a conflagration in the hope that their pursuers may veer off in the belief that they have achieved their purpose. Experienced crews soon get wise to this maneuver and are no longer deceived by it. A tank which is really on fire will show very bright flames, and to simulate such flames is far too risky a business. In many cases, the tank will blow up as the fire catches the ammunition normally always carried in every tank. It is very uncomfortable for us if the explosion is instantaneous and our aircraft is flying at an altitude of 15 to 30 feet above the tank. This happened to me twice in the first few days when I suddenly fly through a curtain of fire and think, this time you're done. I come out, however, safe and sound on the other side, even though the green camouflage of my aircraft is scorched and splinters from the exploding tank have riddled it with holes. Sometimes we dive onto the steel monsters from behind, sometimes from the side. The angle of attack is not too steep to prevent us flying in quite close to the ground, and so also when pulling out from getting into any trouble in case the aircraft overshoots. If it overshoots too far, it is hardly possible to avoid contact with the ground with all its dangerous consequences. We have always to try to hit the tank in one of its most vulnerable places. The front is always the strongest part of every tank, therefore every tank invariably tries as far as possible to offer its front to the enemy. Its sides are less strongly protected, but the best target for us is the stern. It is there that the engine is housed, and the necessity for cooling this power center permits of only a thin armor plating. In order to further assist the cooling, this plating is perforated with large holes. This is a good spot to aim at because where the engine is, there's always petrol. When its engine is running, a tank is easily recognizable from the air by the blue fumes of the exhaust. On its sides, the tank carries petrol and ammunition, but there the armor is stronger than at the back. The tanks frequently carry infantry. If we are in sectors where we are already known, these tank riflemen jump off even when traveling at full speed. They all think their hour has come and that they have only a second before we are upon them. And Ivan prefers to meet the attack on terra firma. In the second half of July, the resistance in front of the German divisions stiffens. Headshock after headshock has to be overcome, and progress is only very slow. We take off daily from morning till night and support the spearheads of the attack, which have advanced northwards across the Pskol River far along the railway from Bjelgorod. One morning on dispersal, we are surprised by a strong formation of IL-2 bombers, which has approached our aerodrome unobserved, flying at low level. We take off in all directions in order to get away from the airfield. Many of our aircraft are still taxiing up to the takeoff in the opposite direction. Miraculously, nothing happens. Our AA guns on the airfield open up for all they are worth, and this evidently impresses the Ivans. We can see normal 2 cm flak ricocheting off the armor of the Russian bombers. Only very few places are vulnerable to this ammunition, but with 2 cm armor-piercing ammo, our light flak can bring down the armored Ivans. Quite unexpectedly at this time, we received the order to move to Orel on the other side of the Bulge, where the Soviets have gone over to the offensive and are threatening Orel. A few hours later, we arrive at the aerodrome north of Orel over Konotop. We find the situation around Orel roughly corresponding to the rumors we have already heard at Charkov. The Soviets are attacking the town from the north, east and south. Our advance has been halted all along the front. We've seen too clearly how this has happened. First, the landing in Sicily, and afterwards the putsch against Mussolini. Each time, our best divisions have had to be withdrawn and speedily transferred to other points in Europe. How often we tell one another during these weeks, the Soviets have only their Western allies to thank that they continue to exist as a militarily effective force. It is a hot August for us in every sense of the word. To the south, there is bitter fighting for the possession of Kromi. In one of our first attacks in this area directed against the bridge in this town, a very odd thing happens to me. As I am diving, a Russian tank just starts to cross the bridge a moment before the bridge was clear in my sights. A 500-kilogram bomb aimed at the bridge hits him when he is halfway across it. Both tank and bridge are blown to smithereens. The defenses here are unusually strong. A few days later in the northern area west of Bolchov, I get a direct hit in my engine. I receive a full burst of splinters in the face. I think first of bailing out, but who can tell where the wind will carry the parachute? There is very little hope of coming down safely, especially as yaks are in this area. I succeed, however, in making a forced landing in the very front German line positions with my engine cut off. The infantry unit occupying this part of the line takes me back to my base in a couple of hours. I take off at once on a fresh sortie and in the same region too. It is a peculiar feeling to return a little later to the same place where one has been shot down a short while before. It stops one from becoming hesitant and brooding over the risks one is running. We are about to take up positions. I've climbed rather too high and observed the heavy flag. It is now directing its fire on our formation, and the gun positions are recognizable from the flash of the guns. I immediately attack them and order the aircraft accompanying me to drop their bombs on the same time on the Russian gun sites. I fly home relieved with the comforting feeling that they too must now be sweating hard. Russian aircraft raid our airfield in the Orel sector every night. At first, we are under canvas, later in stone buildings on the airfield. There are slit trenches alongside the tents. We are supposed to take cover in them as soon as the raiders appear. Some of us, however, sleep through the raids because, in view of the uninterrupted all-day flying, a good night's rest is indispensable if we are to be fit to go out again the next day. In any case, Ivan generally keeps up his bombing all night. My friend Walter Kraus, then skipper of the 3rd Squadron, is killed in one such raid. After his training period with me in the reserve flight at Graz, being a former reconnaissance pilot, he soon found himself at home in the new sector and was a great asset to our wing. He'd just been promoted to squadron leader and awarded the Oak Leaves. We mourn the loss of a friend and comrade with bitter grief. His death is a staggering blow. How many hard blows of incomprehensible destiny must we yet experience? We don't know. I am relieved of the command of the first flight and given the 3rd Squadron instead. I know it inside out from earlier on, for I was its old squadron engineer officer. As far as new faces have appeared, I know them all from my visits to the squadron. It is not difficult to knock them into shape as squadron leader Becker is there. We have nicknamed him Fridolin. There is nothing he does not know. He is the soul and the mother of the ground personnel. Our medical care is in the hands of Stabsarzt Gardermann, who is also the friend and counselor of everybody. Soon, the 3rd Squadron command consists of a kind of family in which all orders are given and carried out in the best cooperative spirit. In the air, this means no sort of reorganization because during the last year I have often led the squadron formation. Here I soon fly my 1200th operational flight. I have as escort a fighter squadron to which, incidentally, the famous skier Jennevine belongs. Between sorties we often chat about our native mountains and, of course, about skiing. He fails to return from one joint mission with our squadron and is reported missing. Apparently, he was hit, then, according to the account of his colleagues, he transmitted over the radio, "I got a hit in the engine. I am flying into the sun." At the time, however, the sun was already almost due west. So, for once, he could not have chosen a more unfavorable course because, in the breakthrough area north of us at Bolsho, the objective of our attack, the Soviets have succeeded in pushing a funnel-shaped wedge through our front from east to west. If, therefore, he flew west, he was over the middle of the breakthrough area and must have come down on Russian territory. A few miles to the south would have been enough to reach our own lines as the funnel is very narrow. Here at Orel, there is no changing our run of bad luck. The staff captain of my 9th flight is flying with his rear gunner, Flying Officer Hörner. He has the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross and is one of the senior officers in our squadron. After being hit by flak in the area northeast of Orel, he nosedives and makes a belly landing in no man's land. He and his aircraft remain there, lying on the slope of a small gully. At first, I believe, he's made a forced landing, although it seemed as if he had been badly hit already in the air. Also, the impact was too violent when his aircraft struck the ground. After flying over the spot several times at low level, I can perceive no movement in the aircraft. Our medical officer goes forward and, with the help of the army, reaches the wreck, but it is too late to save any of the crew. He's taken a priest with him, and so our 2 comrades are laid to their eternal rest. There is very little conversation in our squadron for the next few days, only the most necessary exchanges. The bitterness of the days oppresses us all. It is not very different in other units. In a dawn attack on important Soviet artillery emplacements east of Orel, the flights of the 1st Squadron fly with mine, the 2nd flight led by Flying Officer Jekyll. He has become a magnificent airman and has a pet stunt which he does habitually. Wherever he sees a fighter, he attacks it, even though it is far superior to his aircraft in speed and armament. Already in the Kuban front, he has given us many a laugh. He always contends that his Ju-87 is particularly fast, that at full throttle he can leave the others standing. This cheery soul often brings down a fighter. He reminds one of a stag roaming the forest in search of a hunter, and when he finds one, instantly charging him with lowered antlers. He is the life and soul of this flight. Without repeating himself, he can tell jokes from 9 in the evening till 4 o'clock in the morning. On this particular morning, he has, with his flight, attacked a neighboring battery and we are returning to base. We are just flying over our front line when someone yells, "Fighters!" I can see them a long distance away. They show no signs of attacking us. Jekyll turns around and joins issue with them. He shoots one of them down, but even Fat Jensch, his at other times dependable rear gunner, appears to be looking round instead of in front of him. There is apparently another Lag 5 coming up behind him. I see his aircraft go into a kind of backward dive from a height of 600 feet and burst into flames. I can only imagine that in his eagerness for battle, Egbert forgot how low he was flying and that he had no business to indulge in such acrobatics. So we lose this dear comrade also. The thought occurs to many of us. Now, when one after the other of the old-timers goes, I can almost reckon by the calendar when my own number will be up. Every jinx must come to an end sooner or later. We have long been waiting for our bad luck to change. To live in constant danger induces fatalism and a certain carelessness. None of us any longer gets out of bed when the bombs are dropping at night. Dead tired from being in the air without intermission all day and every day, we hear, half awake and half asleep, the bombs bursting close at hand. In the east to west breakthrough area north of us, things go from bad to worse. Now, Karaichev northwest of us is threatened. In order to reach this target area more quickly and the Shistra sector further in the north, we move to the airfield at Karaichev. Much of the fighting is developing in the forest regions, which are very hard to see into clearly from above. They make it easy for the Reds to camouflage their positions, and our attacks are very difficult. I hardly ever catch sight of a tank, so I mostly fly with a bomber. Since I took over the command of the squadron, the anti-tank flight has been more closely incorporated in my squadron, and the staff work, both technical and tactical, has quickly been adapted to the employment of the cannon-carrying aircraft I introduced. Our stay at Karaichev is not a long one. There has been talk again for some days of another move to the south, where the situation is critical. After several sorties based on Bryansk, we do indeed move back again to Charkov, but this time, our operational base is the aerodrome on the south side of the city. So, after this episode, I think it is time we talk about the author's new toy, the Ju-87G variant, the Cannon Bird, as it is called lovingly. It is a Ju-87 with two 37mm flak guns strapped to the wings, specifically designed to combat tanks and other vehicles. This weapon system was called the BK 3.7, which simply means Bordkanone 3,7 cm, which in turn translates to onboard cannon 37mm. This cannon was based on the 37mm Flak 36, the idea being that it was supposed to be an easy retrofit in the form of a gun pod, and also there was a variety of ammunition types available. As you can imagine, this was indeed not without its problems. For one, the entire gun pod weighed almost 400 kilograms, which is over 850 pounds per wing, which in turn meant that during a dive recovery you would add in excess of an additional 4,000 pounds of weight per side. No wonder they could no longer perform this maneuver. Also, in the G2 variant, the airplane only carried a total of 24 shells, that is 12 shells per gun. The ammo they used, however, was quite powerful. The tungsten core-based APCR round could penetrate up to 52mm of armor, which was plenty when attacking tanks from behind or the sides. There is some gun camera footage available of such an attack, which I will put on screen now. All in all, it was rather a stopgap idea, but it turned out to be very powerful indeed. Another thing that I found interesting is the complete disregard for safety when it came to shenanigans in the air. Some of the guys flew literal circles through flak barrages, one of them actively sought out enemy fighters in his lumbering plane, and Rudel himself immediately went up again after taking shrapnel to the face. These men were truly built different. Anyway, this is it for today. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again in the next episode. Cheers.